And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the New York Information Security Meetup. And I'm very excited to introduce Greg Fitzgerald, who is the President and CEO and Chief Experience Officer of Sevco Security. Thanks, Greg, for joining. Much appreciated.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks a lot.
So, what's this Chief Experience all about? Let's start with that.
That's a great question. A lot of people, buy technology for a product's sake, right? Technology for technology's sake. But not a lot of companies focus on the actual use and the use case and the experience of using that technology, which is one of the reasons why a lot of stuff is not installed correctly, is not configured correctly, and hence there's still gaps and holes in the protection schema that they're trying to put in the first place. So one of the things I've noticed over my 27 years of being in cybersecurity and high tech is that those technologies that are easy to use, simple to understand, and that the experience of the user of that technology is a positive and kind of seamless engagement wins, right? And the new technologies that are coming out that are cloud-based and others are taking over, not always for economics, but because it's simple and the experience is very consumerish. So at Sevco, yours truly was assigned to make sure that everything from the presentation of the value proposition all the way through the procurement and the installation is monitored, it's measured, and that we continually improve ourselves to be a really good partner and not just a technology provider.
But isn't that was a promise since the days of plug and play, or should I say plug and pray?
Yes. Yeah. Technology is not simple, right? We all know that there are certain technologies that just require a lot more work, right? And then there's others that are a lot more simple, but the plug and pray element is very true. I think, the consumerization of technology, where Apple, right, frankly, it's just made complexity more simple, is now an expectation. So even if you can't be the best in the technological requirements of installation configuration, there should be at least a mantra of the company, meaning people, whether they're the services group, the customer success group, even the sales guys and the procurement, should be focusing on trying to make that a seamless and frictionless effort as possible.
Well, tell that to the customers trying to get an answer for a simple question like what is the pricing? Something as simple as that. Sometimes it takes like they can't just send you a pricing. They have to book a meeting with you to figure things out, right?
Yeah, I think that's wrong too. I think transparency is key. I think the entire model of selling is going to become authenticity, right? Authenticity is kind of who you are, and if the thing's expensive and you're premium priced, then that's what it is. If your pricing model is too complex to understand, then that in of itself, to me, sends a signal to the buyer like, what are you trying? What are you hiding? There's something more that's here, and there's a lot of technologies that exist that started that way that are they're trapped. They're trapped in their own model, is my mean. Like once you start going gap accounting, changing that pricing model is very difficult. So, again, startups like ours and others are starting to, refine how they actually present this to the customer and let people know. So, you don't necessarily always have to put on the website. There's always competitive issues or, frankly, mapping issues like to the channel where you give people different pricing based on volume and things like that relative to the channel. So it doesn't always become right or even legally possible to post it on the website and say it costs X. But it's certainly something that should be a little bit easier. Someone says, hey, what's your pricing? Like in our case, we're number of endpoints, just how many number of devices under management. Simple as that. Like there's a dollar amount and it's like that times the number of devices, and it's simple as that and we can do it on an annual basis or a monthly basis. So purchasing is simple. And if you want to do something else, we finance it or we find a way to do payment system that makes, again, the buying easier. Why should that be the complexity, right? It should be the technologies and compare the technologies, not how you buy it. So I'm with you.
So you are trying to break the mold around where there's mystery, there are margins, right?
Yeah.
That's typically what kind of the VAR is saying. And I think that the reason why it was always complex is that they were trying to prevent from customers to shop around or compare like products and so on, and you're trying to break that. And Greg, you are a serial entrepreneur. This is not your first company, right? So what and typically from at least from interviewing entrepreneurs in this particular space is that you come across a problem that you didn't see a solution for, and you decide just go for it and solve it on your own. Was this the case here with Sevco as well?
Very much. Thanks for saying that. This is my 11th startup company. I've worked for some big corporations.
Unbelievable.
And I've had four that were not successful. I've had four that have been, let's say, single, double kind of hits that were good and helpful. All right, and then I've had another three. Well, I'm gonna say two that were very, very good. Cylance as an endpoint antivirus, was exactly what you're talking about. Hugely successful. And then now I'm preying on Sevco and answering your question. Yes. Each time, and I'm not a technologist, right? I'm a marketing, go-to-market, sales, finance guy. I did investment banking when I got out of university. And I realized, you got to look at how big a market is in terms of total market size really counts. Like, if it's only $100 million, why get in the business? Because there's not enough money in there to make it, even if I only had a fraction. But if it's a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity, it's great. If it's got a lot of traditional players, meaning pure inertia and momentum, is really hard for them to innovate, right? And frankly, as they grow, what happens? The really smart, innovative, ingenuitive guys and girls that are in the companies, they leave and they go start up other companies. So that problem is they get trapped in a certain model of how they act and perform, and like I said, finance. So in what I've always tried to do is look for the opportunities, talking to the customers, and really observing where the gaps are in terms of, in our case, cybersecurity coverage, right? And Sevco was literally founded under the premise of the use case where people are deploying all these prevention technologies out to their endpoints, whether it be a server, or laptop, or phone, or whatever. The problem is it only takes one device to get compromised, whether it's ransomware or malware, whatever, that's attached to the network. And that entire investment effort proposition of prevention is blown out of the water. And that's usually caused because the organization does not have a true, clear understanding of the total number of devices, the types of devices, who's using them, where they're accessing from, and what's on them, like what software and applications are on them. And that is a wicked hard problem that people have tried to solve over the years. But we found in today's architecture now a unique architecture with using the cloud. The fact that a lot of technologies are now open APIs and credential access, that we can aggregate that and dedupe, deconflict, get naming normalization. So our magic is being able to create one single source of truth that's not a SIM, because that's logs and events. It's not a CMDB, because those are antiquated and that's owned by IT and they don't keep it updated. So that's not very the most accurate, I should say. Also, those integrations are very hard to do. The total cost of ownership are really hard. So answering that question was like, let's do it new, let's do it differently, and provide that value that people have been seeking for. Now, we're still young and we're growing. We got some phenomenal customers, and we're learning every day on the things we can improve upon, some of the challenges that we need to overcome, some of that are technological, some are operational, and it's allowing us to continue to grow. But it's the mindset that I don't see across the 2,500 cybersecurity companies that are out here, where they're usually saying, I got a wicked technology, go buy it, or this should solve your problem. Doesn't work that way, at least not to be successful.
When you mentioned talking to customers, right, and asking them, so isn't it like if you ask people before the invention of the car what they wanted, they would say, okay, I want a faster horse, So how do you balance, between working with asking the customers what they want and need and where the gaps are, and then being a thought leader and innovating the space beyond that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think a lot of companies miss that when they're saying, oh, customers first, which I don't always believe, right? Customers not always right. They don't know what they want. They presume there are certain ways to design it. So answering that question again is it's how you ask the question, and a lot of it is what they're trying to achieve, right? So if a guy says, okay, I want a faster horse, I might come back and answer the question, or ask him the question of, are you just trying to get to one place quicker than the way a horse can? Do you want to get there more comfortably? Are you trying to take more things with you from A to B, right? None of those have anything to do with a horse, but it would provide the problem that's trying to be solved. And then now we can go figure out a horse isn't going to cut it. right? I need a new, literally something new. It happens to be a vehicle. Now, in this particular case, using that similar analogy there, now my challenge is to go convince them that this is going to solve all of their problems, or at least, address what they wanted to do. But they had never imagined an automobile of any sort, right? So technology is the same way, is continue to focus on the problems and what's trying to be solved. Don't take it for, their word value and their face value, but look between the lines. And that is where you get vision. That's where you get a lot of people that are out there saying, this is where things are going over the next 2 to 3 years. And you can believe them by the way that they verbalize and communicate that particular problem, not the solution in this particular case.
Let's talk about convincing a little bit. We talked about there are 2,500 companies out there with massive amount of budget for marketing and so on. And I think a lot of companies just spend oodles of money just going out there and trying to convince and trying to create the marketplace. How do you break through that noise and able to differentiate, as you mentioned, that provide that that convincement to make sure that they understand and deliver, especially when something like this is not tangible. It's very tough to you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. How do you go from from idea inception to go to market to able to get the first traction of being a startup?
Great question. It's interesting. I think marketing per se has changed dramatically over the past 10 years. And in particular, thanks to COVID, or no thanks to COVID, getting out in front of people and just being present, whether you're at Black Hat or RSA or Gartner, of the main shows that most cybersecurity companies would participate in, where, to your point, you're spending tens of thousands to $500,000 or more trying to make a booth and have presence and dinners and lunches and events and all these things. That was the way to get awareness in the beginning. Whether you're a small company or big company, you just made the financial commitment. This is what I want to do. Today,
Greg, let me just but I want to just sorry to interrupt, but I was just saying the awareness piece.
Yeah.
I've had somebody tell me, like, we're not, we're companyname.com, not companyname.org. We're not in the awareness, business. It's a very, very dangerous place to be, because maybe you want somebody else to educate and have them aware, and why you go in and sell.
Yeah. And I think now where my point is, it was changing. Mm-hmm. So now I think it's a lot more grassroots, frankly. People, are looking for testimony, right? Meaning somebody like me got that, right? I don't want to be the only guy buying into it. Now, there's the concept of crossing the chasm and early adopters and innovators and that kind of stuff. But innovators and other innovators, they still know each other, right? They're like, well, did John try this thing out? Did he like it, right? David really thinks it's cool. And so the element of that is grassroots, I think at startups, you got to get your foot in the door, and hopefully you're using your lifetimes of relationships. Again, authenticity, the relationships, being sincere, fulfilling on what you say you can do. Do not promise all these things. The biggest problem, since I'm a marketer, is, people say that their technology can solve, all these problems. And you're like, dude, you're overreaching. And therefore now the validity and the credibility, it not only is discounted for that particular vendor in person, but almost across the board, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're looking at our particular case is asset management, right? Asset intelligence. And then you've got companies that are saying, well, we do that too, or we've already done that. And we know for a fact, technically and operationally, that ain't the case. And if they do it, it's at such a small level, it's not solving the problem. It's a contextual element to their actual core. I'll give you a hard example. There's a report coming out from ESG, and it's about vulnerability management, right? And then people have been relying on understanding their environment by saying, oh, my scanner will discover everything on my network. You're like, really? No, it doesn't. What if it's not behind, scanner can't scan certain things. It can't get the cloud. It can't do PYOD. It can't do IoT. So you're going to miss at least 50% or more of the devices and the users on your environment if you only count on that. So point being is, but if you look at the websites and you look at some of these guys that say it, like, oh yeah, we do this. So it's not misinformation. It's just not accurate. And
And it's so tough as well. It's to break through that noise, right? So that's why I'm really curious to hear. I'm trying to peel the onion on this,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. So what I would do, what we're doing, and what I suggest I do some consulting on the other sides is like, let's go win some key accounts in the sense of they don't necessarily have to be brand names. They just have to be use cases that then you can build on top of that. This is the problem, and this is how we solved it. And then what we do is we communicate that in specialty organizations, even like yours. This podcast is fantastic as a way to give the honest and kind of succinct information around what the value proposition could be. The listeners then are subject to their own creation, and they'll probably go to the website. They might check somebody else if someone's used this, and it creates a momentum is what it comes down to. You set the seed, you got to water the seed, you got to nurture the plant, right? Then there'd be other seeds that come out of that plant and continue to go to the next level, and those grow. I'll give you a hard example. We started in February of 2020, right at the beginning of COVID.
Wow.
But we landed one major. We met in a small customer, and then we planted that seed with some couple of others, and then that came around to where we had others that were like grew. Now we got almost 1,000 customers and implementations, and that was no marketing. We have no marketing. It's all been word of mouth or a push through our reseller channel or through referrals, and that's how we're getting it. So most people still don't even know who the heck we are. We have done no brand, right? We have done no real promotion, and our website, frankly, is still basic. Doesn't even say all the stuff we should be doing on it. But that's an element that gets to that. I do believe there's another piece tactically that I'm seeing now as we speak, where we've on virtual events, but obviously people are coming back. And so now there's more like one-on-one events, regional lunches, regional, kind of meetings that people are willing to get out of their house, go to that, but not be exposed to mass crowds, right? Not do that. But the most important thing is it's very intimate, if that makes sense. It's very key.
Yeah, makes total sense. And the next question is, from a asset intelligence perspective, right? So what I find specifically is that customers, enterprise, they move in tandem. They have projects that are typically budgeted and scheduled sometimes 12, 18 months in advance, right? And they follow like let's say Gartner or other type of consulting firms recommendations, and you have to catch them within that cycle kind of thing. You have to catch them where they're about to actually, you have to catch them probably just in the investigation stage where they're not even thinking, because by that time that they're already ready to move, they already picked like three providers, and they're going ahead and may or may not even test those, right? They may call, like as you mentioned, they may call their colleagues and ask, how is that product? How do you align yourself, the company messaging and product to that cycle? Because we move in cycles, right? It's like, it's the in this particular case, asset management or asset intelligence is a hot topic these days, but it may not be within 6 to 12 months, depending on the cycles.
That's right. Well, I think, you look at two elements where timing is everything. I think the success that I've had in the past and the failures, frankly, have been a lot about timing. I was in too early in many companies where the idea and the concept and even the technology was just a year or two too early, right? And when we ran out of money and the momentum to really grow. On the other side, I've been a little late on one of the two, where like we were now fighting kind of incumbents, and it's like, oh, that's a rough fight. So timing is everything for the vendor, the producer of what you're doing. Part of that too gets into how do you promote yourself. The classic 101 of marketing being, awareness, interest, desire, and action of the prospect. And to your point, getting in early. How do we get to that? We do spend a lot of time, and again, 27 years really gives us some good understanding of how the cybersecurity personnel research. What do they do, right? Again, as all research shows, that customer has done 90% of the purchasing decision making before they even talk to a sales rep, right?
Yes, that's amazing point, Greg. I completely agree with you, and it's almost like by that time the salesperson is almost obsolete, because they're already like the customer's already made a decision. They just, all they need is little love and attention, to move forward, right?
Well, it's true. And I mean, if they find out, right, then I should just be answering questions. right, about clarity of what they've researched. And again, more consultative approach, not a hard sell, show up, throw up, like this is what we do. If you like it, great. If you don't, maybe I can convince you you will. Those days have significantly changed, in my opinion, because of the power of the consumer, the buyer, and the amount of research they can do. So website, content, blogs, podcasts, how people research, what do they actually do to get that information before they come talk to you? And again, I'm finding success in our organization through the use of these testimonials and use cases. And a lot of them are not even written. They're just like, I will put you in touch with David and he will tell you the good, bad, and the ugly. And I'm not going to be on the call. Right. But it's the confidence that, hey, he's going to be, again, authentic and sincere, because there's no technology that does everything flawlessly. There's no technology that has every feature that everybody wants. Right. But it's almost like, look, and I like these guys. I think one of the big changes as well that's coming around in technology for startups mostly, right, is, can I rely on these guys, right? One, do they have a track record of being successful? Two, can I rely on them to help me? Because if I'm going to take a chance, like, they're going to come to my rescue. I don't want to be the idiot that purchased them, right, if they're not. But I will be the smart guy if it's an early, a game changing, it's going to help me with my value prop. They seem to solve my value prop. And if they'll help me, then I feel confident, right? They got my back. And boy, I see a lot of that in our particular industry right now with our competitors. We're winning deals because the other company is an asshole. No other reason. They actually got more features. They got more capabilities, right? And so I'll win on that all day long.
No, it's amazing. Like, it's a marketing slogan. We're not assholes. That's it. That's all we have to do, and to win business. And do you prefer Greg, the top down and bottom up, like, approach from a sales perspective? Because, everybody wants to talk to the CISO, right? But these people are inundated with millions LinkedIn messages, emails, you name it. They're unreachable. They don't answer the phone. They don't. I mean, they have an assistant that somebody looks at their email. So everybody wants to talk to them, but they don't have the time to. So how do you overcome that? And I'm sure, again, you probably noticed that things have changed in that regards as well.
That's a really good question, because I still think, as one looks at the buyer, right? You've got the technical buyer, you got the influencer, you have the economic buyer, you have the operational, maybe policy buyer, right? Just understanding who you got to talk to can go two ways. I agree with you 100%. Trying to get the top down is just hard. Not that you shouldn't keep trying, because eventually what they really need to know is, for the most part, have I heard the name before, right? Like, they may not know what the heck the technology does, because most companies have like 17 different technologies just in the cybersecurity world, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And some of them, they don't even care what it is, the underlying.
They don't care, right? But if it comes up from the kind of the people they've hired, then, it helps if they're like, okay, got it. I've heard this one. I know it. Or I'm going to do one check maybe if they need to, because, if it's 100,000, it depends on purchasing, limits they have, right? If they're a big company and like, dude, I can stroke $1 million check without any approvals, knock it out. Other companies are like, I can't get past 25 grand without approval, right? In our case, depending on how many devices you got, it can be anywhere between 25 and 200 grand, right, for what we do. And so it varies on that top level. Now, the key, I think, again, is understanding that your buyer. So we at Sevco, we spend a lot of time on the ideal customer profile. Right? Who is the one that has the most acute problem, and not only like company, but person? And then who are they, right? Are they old guys like me that've been through this and like jaded as hell? Or are they younger guys that just don't have the skills, that need some help, that would love to do their job better and faster, quicker, stronger, because they're totally overburdened and they're understaffed and underskilled overall? And if we understand that and we go, okay, that's more of a, say, a 30-year-old who's got kids, who's got a wife that's beaten down on him because he's now working out of home. Like, if we understand that, we're like, dude, we understand your challenges. You don't have time to go track all these assets down. You can't do it. Physically impossible to go accurately. You have to do this for audit. You have to do this for understand the rollout of your cybersecurity stuff. And it's on your back. Oh, by the way, you got to pick up the kids from school. Oh, if you know some of those personal elements, or at least the chances of that type of profile, it makes talking to them much more powerful in the sense it's authentic and sincere, and you're truly trying to solve that problem. Now, here's why it's important. I think they're the users of the technology, right? They're the ones that if you can get it in their hands, then that's huge, right? They just get to try it. So trials are huge. Not necessarily POVs and evals and all that stuff, but just like let them see a little bit of what it's like. Get their little hands on it. Again, why is that analogy the same? Consumer products do that all the time, right? Take down this little app, see if it works. You don't like it, discard it. I think enterprise technologies are needing to go that. And you see that a lot in the companies that are a lot of consumer product companies, but the ones that are giving you trials are key. So your bottoms up is a way, again, more grassroots, solve the problem, get out to the users, get out. They're the ones that are looking for the technologies. They're searching their the websites. They're it's often the ones going to some of the regional shows. Then the CISOs are the ones that are spending the bigger dollars to go to maybe one or two shows and are reading a different set of materials in terms of websites and research that they're looking at. So you can't ignore both, but it really, I think you gotta go to who you're really trying to get to be your champion, and then let him or her, take it up and hopefully help them in that process.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like you look into the kind of the buyer's persona as a key element as part of the sales process. And let's talk a bit about the sales process itself. Like, our companies now still do the 30, 60 days trial period, or they test like 3 products and have a selection criteria. I remember they used to have like these, booklets with selection criteria, and you have to like, have check marks and so on, and then go through like RFP, RFI, and so on. Is that still the case?
I still see that, yes. And there's 2 reasons why. One, some of it's just the norm of the process, right? And so if you're a bigger company, they just got a process. You got to follow it. We're seeing a lot more in the requirements for audit. This is very interesting. Like, are we following a fair process where you need like 3 vendors? Now, I'm not seeing as many RFI type things because frankly, it's just a lot of work. And usually one vendor gets in there and, influences it, and therefore it's biased from the start. I'm not seeing as many of those, and I don't know why that's the case, but I'm seeing more of, I need to have some sort of criteria upon which I can at least evaluate one technology versus the next. So we do get to see that in the buying process.
So interesting. What about the leveraging the kind of the channel? A lot of companies are now the go-to-market has changed a little bit, just due to the fact that you just mentioned that it's so hard to get to the top level decision makers, and it's all about trust, authenticity, and so on. So they like to work with partners that have that existing relationship. What's your take on it in terms of go-to-market?
That's a great question. Actually, I'm a big relationship oriented person myself. I'm a huge channel fan. Always believed in channel. Why? Because they own the account, right? They're the trusted advisor. They're the ones that can guide. Now, hopefully, they're guiding with the best technology. A lot of times we see they make a lot of margin and they stick with older technologies, not necessarily looking out for their customer. So that's a different story. It's more about the person than it is about the company. But I'm a huge fan of that. Like, I think when we were talking before, I'm lucky to be in this business, man. Like, I was a banker, right? And I got 2 master's degrees and I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. And I went to Coca-Cola Company and I got a job at Compaq in the 90s, in 96. And it was like intranet division versus internet divisions, internet just coming out. The timing of when I came into this market is completely, blessing, to be honest, right? I've seen it from when firewalls were just software firewalls and username and password were the only security in the market. Now, like I said, it's all over the board. And the reason I bring that up is it's the relationships that have been built over that time period that is why people will go, Greg, I'm going to at least listen to what you have to say, because you're going to tell me the truth. You can say, I don't know it. I don't know the answer to that question. And so channel is really important. Now, the problem with channel today is that it's broken up. It's no longer like the reseller with his or her accounts. Now you got MSSPs that are distinct and managing, but there's a variety of MSSPs. Some just sell. They're kind of a resell, but they'll say kind of manage, but they might manage one product. Then you got MSSPs that are managing a variety of technologies, but not the whole service orientation. Then you got others that provide A to Z, right? Then you got integrators, and you've got that, so they're going to do all the integration, and they'll, they don't have to be big companies; they can be small integrators with medium-sized companies. And then you've got the resellers, and those could be just pure, like, yeah, take it, you take the product, and I'll take the margin. And then there's others that are a hybrid, right? And so it's a fascinating experience on the vendor side now to one, try to understand who does what, first of all. Second of all, are you even part of the solution offering that they have with their customers today, or can you be a new piece? And we see a lot of companies that are, especially in the MSSP or MSP, right, relative from more the network segment, trying to get into the security world, trying to find new ways to provide more value to their customer. The challenge for them is, how do we as a vendor make their job easier to package up this as a product offering or a SKU number in the MSP or MSSP or even the resellers line card? Because they can pick anything they want. But again, it goes back to customer experience, ease of use, clear value proposition, and then proof, right? And then of course, that is just to get started. Then you got to talk about margins and all the elements of supporting that channel, creating, marketing opportunities, spiff programs, incentives, events that you do together. Like, there's a lot of effort.
Yeah, it's a major commitment. It's even on the product side as well. They're demanding like a multi-tenancy, the ability to have a turnkey solution. You have to provide training for their technical staff and the salespeople. I mean, it's a whole, just working with channel. People think, oh, let's do a channel program. Okay, let's go ahead and do a channel program. But that's a major commitment.
It is a huge commitment, and it's also one, again, it's like having friends, right? I can have lots of associates, but I have few friends. And the friends I have, I want to love, hug, and squeeze. So a lot of vendors themselves try to kind of go broad, right? Like, I'm going to go do all this stuff. And that's not, again, that doesn't do anybody any good. You're doing a lot, but only half-ass or not very well, right? Focus on the ones that you can build a relationship with, support, and grow. And again, after, like I said, 11 companies, almost every single one of them, I got in and said, we got to be channel oriented. And that is not a statement, it's a behavior. That means channel oriented needs to be, like you said, the product has to be channel friendly. It's got to work the way they want it. It's got to have features that they need. Like you said, multi-tenancy in the MSSP market, single sign-on, right? That's going to make it real quick, one click and configure. It's got to have a pricing model that's got to fit theirs, not force them to do ours, right? It's got to fit their pricing model. We've got to be able to do the things that are going to help them sell. Like I said, package it up, joint collateral, or at least some further training. And a lot of companies try to get as many as they can. And the reality is they can't sustain it. They can't support it. Now, I'm going to qualify one thing. New technologies have to have someone carrying the flag, right? They have to have someone that knows their technology, represents that technology, and fights the good fight. So going to the behavior, don't take the damn thing direct and screw the channel. Instead, ask the customer, who do they buy from, right? And give them the deal. Okay, finance department of the vendor, you're going to get upset. Why do we give away 20%? Well, dude, that's part of the game. That's how it's played. And you give money to these guys because they're going to go to their customer base who we can't get to, or even if we could, they wouldn't trust us. Why? Because they trust them. So that eventually will come back around if nurtured and supported correctly. And that's how the channel typically works. And so that experience is really crucial across the entire behavior. Hence, customer experience officer is such a critical element of what I think any company does.
Also what I found is that the DNA of a company is very much determined by the executives, right? And I think that part of you preach authenticity, but it shows. I mean, you're an authentic guy. You have if I talk to you, and I'm sure people that know you like for many years, they know that they can trust you, and you tell them how it is. And you sit on a board of companies. You're an advisor. There are, like, as you mentioned, 25, maybe 100, maybe 3,000 companies out there. And a lot of them don't have the opportunity to work with somebody like yourself. Where is this industry going? I mean, how it would eventually turn into a consolidation game? Because we talked about previously about this unbelievable valuation, this game of like raising funds and funds and fund into like astronomical valuation, which is almost doesn't make any sense in terms of like the actual in actuality. But they keep doing it. Is this is the train is going to keep running the way it is?
That's a good question, David. I try to separate a little bit of the finance operations from the value of the company. The classic statement is, you don't build a company to be bought, right? I mean, to sell, you build it to be bought, right? In a sense, you just grow it to do the right thing. The valuations start to separate values in the company, to be honest, right? You got the investors whose pure intention is shareholder value, as it should be, whether you're private or public. But that can differ with the management team. So one of the things that I see happening is that we're in an oligopoly of technology today, cybersecurity, right? You got the Palo Altos, you got the Ciscos, right? You got the Proofpoints, you got the CrowdStrikes, now you got a SentinelOne, right? You got these massive companies, but they're a handful. Like only got to 5. Now stretched to really see who are the other 5 for real, right? Imperva maybe. I mean, they're still kind of niche, but Imperva, but they're public. You got, FireEye. Okay, that's great. We're seeing what's happening. But
Mandiant,
yeah.
And Greg, you're going to get so many people upset at you that you didn't mention them.
Top 5, So my concept of the thing is there's an oligopoly of companies that kind of dominate the market, and then there's everybody else, right? And to your point, it does take money. It does take effort. It takes size in many cases to grow that little company, to get up to maybe let's call it the cream of the crop, right, of the small companies, to where either, again, they get into a precarious position financially in the sense of you got to break through this $100 million mark. And then you're not going public until you can get to close to the $200+ million mark, right? The level has changed significantly over my lifetime of being able to go public. And the challenges have really changed a lot. So now it's the acquisition game. And of course, then you're ponying up to various players, and you just like a girl in a bar, dude, just like guys are lining all up and they're like, she's really attractive. I'd like to go say hi to her, but there's a lot of guys. So it's how do you best position what you're doing, show that, again, the value and the integration to these. And if you get bought, great. You're a lucky person if that happens. If not, then you've built a business that's sustainable, right? That's going to grow on its own. And then it goes to your valuation standpoint. We're very diligent. My co-founder, JJ Guy, is wicked smart and a technologist, and we're on the conservative side of growth. We've been with companies, and I kind of have a little bit of a reputation of spending a lot of money in marketing to make a big show, right? Like with Cylance, we did that. We sponsored Bryson DeChambeau as a golfer, right? He was like, holy crap. But we found him when he was coming out of college. Didn't cost us much. But then he becomes the number 5 golfer in the world within the same year. So you're like, holy crap. Now it looks expensive, but it's not. There's a lot of ways to do things cheap. But my point on that is that you got to kind of, the investments are to try to raise that awareness, get that company to rise above that competition level, which again is that encompassing piece of how do you do that without money in a noisy market. And I kind of go back again to maybe the fundamentals and the principles of business in and of itself. Create some value, earn your right for people to talk about you. I'll give you a hard example, actually, now that it comes to my mind. I've never been more proud than in 2002. I was working for Tipping Point Technologies, right? It was the first marketing guy hired in there as it changed.
Yeah, amazing company.
Yeah, in an intrusion prevention system, right? We were like, wow. And I went to a Gartner conference, and you're sitting there eating your breakfast, and my tag had turned around. I wasn't wearing a branded shirt like I am now. And one of the people just started talking about breakfast, and they started talking about next gen technology. And at that time, that was the next gen technology. And someone goes, "Hey, I just bought this Tipping Point thing. Now it's expensive, but man, it is awesome." And this other guy was like, "Well, I never heard of it. Like, that's neat." My point was, I was just smiling. I didn't tell him who I was. I didn't say it. I just listened to the conversation, because it was that word of mouth, that peer-to-peer interaction, that understanding that the product was adding value out of the box, and he enjoyed it. And yeah, it was expensive, but it wasn't a pricing thing, right? It was a value thing. And that started to, it creates its own momentum. And one more piece to that is, I always talk about small companies, just kick up dust. People, that's what, if you ask anybody about me, they're like, Greg just wants to kick up dust. The point is dust has gold flakes in it. And as the dust settles, you can catch some of those gold flakes. Those gold flakes are key customers. It's a bunch of activity that you just got to get rolling. Talk to everybody you know, right, about what you're doing, the value proposition. Get your mom talking about it, right? And she talks to friends, and all of a sudden you find out that her friends are like the CEO of XYZ company who's like, yeah, I heard your company. And you never know what's going to come from, right? In most cases, marketing is not a direct response. Like you can't really, okay, email, yeah, they got it, right? They visit our website. 9 times out of 10, it's totally tangential that people come in and they're like, yeah, I got this. How'd you find this out? Well, we were talking to a friend who happened to have a son who's thinking about getting into cybersecurity, right? And you're like,
it's a pretty amazing. You're right. It's sometimes and just the fact that doors are open, somebody may just walk right in. Just being in business, you just have to stay in business. So I want to ask you, like, coming back to the human element, which I think you're big on,
yeah,
both on the customer side and then also internally. You've worked with so many people in the past, and you created companies over and over again. How do you pick that initial team to join you in that journey? Because again, my understanding that in the initial stages, everyone really counts,
yeah.
and so you had your choice of people that you've worked with in the past, of course. But how do you pick the kind of the first initial team?
That's a great question too, because like my co-founder JJ, we got to know each other. I didn't know him for a long time, but he and I worked together at JASK, which was a next gen SIM company that got bought by Sumo Logic. And what's interesting is I just got to know him in the company. And I really respected the way he thinks, how he understands culture is such a key element. And so we teamed up, but we had to build the trust. We had to build respect, right? We didn't know each other that well. And respect and trust are only built over time through experiences, right? And so let me take that back with finding the
And
initial.
then I'll mention that that also they're fragile, right?
Yes.
Because once you build it over time, you don't need much to blow it up, right?
Oh, hands down. You're 100% correct on that one too,
Hmm.
because you just do one thing or you make a call that he didn't reference. We're co-founders, right? So we're equal in almost every aspect. I've actually made him the CEO because that's a hard damn job, right? And that's not my skill set, frankly. So we realized, wow, this is great. I'm good at this, and he's good at that. This is a yin and yang. This thing's going to work great. And so I kind of look at that as the first founders, right? First thing that you're doing, it's best to not have the homogeneity of skills, right? I don't want 2 sales guys, 2 marketing guys, right? He's got to understand operations and tech. I understand go to market in its fullness. And so those two come together. So understanding just the general strengths. But before that, I really do believe that people need to have a heart to heart as to who they are. So self-awareness is bar none. The number one thing is needed so that you can then sync with your other team members on the cultural values, right? We want hungry people. We want them to be humble. That's a really key piece, right? Cockiness and like attitude, they don't have a place, frankly, anywhere because someone's always done something better than you in some way, shape, or form, right? There's always a boss above you. So one way, shape, or form. So, dude, be humble about it all. And if you made a gazillion dollars, nobody wants to hear about it, to be honest, right? That's a self-insecurity if someone's like got a big, a big ego with that, right? It's nothing wrong with using it or having it or showing it, but it's an attitude. So hungry, and then smart. We want people who can think for themselves, that are, ingenuity in their mindset, who understand, self-awareness and an EQ, like, and not just an IQ, but the whole element of social understanding, right? That is key, right? In the very, very beginning. Now, what's important is that you get those traits and values, and then you communicate them like ad nauseum. When I say that, like at every meeting that we have, JJ and myself are constantly repeating, we want hungry, humble, and smart. And also we want people that are authentic, right? We want to be able to people to speak their minds and not be like penalized or, contentious, right? It's okay to disagree, but let's have a healthy conversation. That's one of the biggest problems in our freaking politics today. Nobody can have a freaking healthy conversation on different sides of the table. So, it's a learned skill in many cases, but it's one that you can find. And so that builds, the cultural elements of the team. And then therefore, you use those principles. There's a great book, Patrick Leoncini, who has it, is The Ideal Team Player. You ought to read that book. That's something we're doing internally on our own team. And we have like a book club, basically, of respectable, highly admired books that teach both culture and skills. And in this particular book, it's like, what's the ideal team player? Because when you're this small, dude, everybody's a team player, right? We're like 30 people. So everybody's got to pick up a shovel and dig, and everybody's got to do something. So, you don't get into hierarchical society and like, I do this and this title. We're not even big guys in title. Hence, we kind of talk about that as a founder, but we're like, chief experience, what the hell is that? For real, right? There's not a title like that. So, and I'm a man of one, right? I serve everybody else. You could say, Greg, a lot of people, man, report to you. Like, no, it's quite the opposite. I am here to service them because they're the ones that got to get the job done. I'm the logger, right? I'm just trying to clear the log jams. If someone's having a hard time, let me know. So I'm the one's going to try to figure it out because I want them to do their best job the best way they can and be empowered. Make decisions. We push decisions way down, right? It's like, don't come to me. Like, what do you recommend the suggestion is, right? I can tell you, but that's probably not going to be accurate because I'm not the closest guy to that point, right? Either the technology, the customer, the sales process, and I can just give guidance and mindset. So that's how I see like the internal elements.
That's totally like, I think anybody should like play this in like, half speed because there's so much tremendous insight that needs to be absorbed. We cover so much in a short time, and absolutely love that. Especially for, people that are just founding companies, and there are just so many like golden nuggets, part of the golden dust that you're talking about. But what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they wanted to hear more about Sevco, or just advice or mentorship or whatever the case may be? You have such a unbelievable experience.
Well, thank you. I think, again, humble that I'm blessed to have this opportunity, frankly, and to be able to be looked at that way. I had a mentor. I think everybody needs someone that he looked up to, but I had one time who said to me, man, all his armor has just chinks all over it, right? From just getting beat up by the process. And I was like, that's really interesting. I feel the same way because you're able to share experiences with people who will actually maybe learn something, right? One of my bucket list items is I want 5 mentees who will have said, Greg taught me something before I die. That's all I'm really looking for. I want someone to say, that was great, right? And I don't know if they exist now or not, to be honest, but I'm hoping that someone is. So if you want to get in touch, Sevco Security, Sevco Security is the name of the company. It's Sevco .io or sevcosecurity.com. My email is Greg, Greg, at sevco.io. And, send an email. I'll be happy to provide some guidance and time if I can. I'm running a startup, and actually I'm a part of 3. I think you and I, Dave, talked about it. Sevco is my startup that is venture backed. I've got another company called Cyberforce Security, which is a distributor of cybersecurity products that I've sold over the years, and some of the next gen type things. Because again, the value proposition is people don't have time to research all this stuff. So I've, especially on endpoint security, which we specialize in, I know the difference between Cylance, SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, Deep Instinct, Deep Armor, ESET, you name it, all 60 plus endpoint vendors. I can tell you down to the detail, for the most part, why one's good and one's not. Not necessarily, it has to be for their use case, right? Can't just say, oh, this guy's are the best. Doesn't work that way. So, that's a business I run with another team. And then I'm also an advisory and on the board of a company called CrowdPoint Technologies, which is going to be a game changer if this works. But it's all about kind of bringing all kinds of technologies and services to the masses, basically, as a better way of bringing that to market. It hasn't quite launched yet, but it's a really neat game. But thank you for your time here. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, I feel absolutely privileged that you found the time to chat with me today, and I'm looking forward to potentially hosting you in New York City. And
Yeah.
we should do these more often. Like I feel like you could have taken any of these topics and then filled out like the time and like dive a little deeper. But I wanted to cover like certain types of topics throughout this conversation. But I feel like we could have peeled the onion a little bit more. But looking forward to potentially seeing you in New York City. And until then, thank you very, very much for joining. Thanks all for joining. Looking forward to seeing you in the next session.